We've got Benedict Rogers of Hong Kong Watch. Also, we've got Lord Alton, who is part of IPAC, the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China. Of course, Afzal Khan, who's IPAC as well, but also the member for Manchester Gorton. Obviously, myself. We've got Bob Chen, who you'll be hearing more from as well. So, without further ado, what I'd like to do is just remind everybody through this video, and then I will ask Bob Chen to speak and take Afzal to say a few words, and then we can take some questions, I think. Is that all right with you all? Yeah. So we run that again? Oh. No, I don't think so.
I don't know what's happened there. It's plugged in TV.
Oh, well, shut it down if we don't get it, doesn't matter. If we're not going to get it, don't worry. Okay, so the video was only to remind you all, not that you probably need any reminding, about the assault and vandalism that took place, perpetrated by members of the CCP, the Consul group at the time, and the important thing is what actually happened rather than what's now being put out by them. And then I want to come to the government's response after that as well. So if I can go to Bob first. Bob, would you like to explain very clearly what happened at the time and whether or not you were dragged inside, or whether, as the Chinese government now says, you weren't dragged inside? Perhaps you can make that explanation, and the injuries that you've suffered. Over to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Chen. I was the victim of an attack in Manchester on Sunday. On Sunday, 16th of October, I took part in a protest outside the Chinese consulate in Manchester. It was a protest against the CCP on the day when its chairman Xi Jinping was due to give his opening remarks at the Chinese Communist Party Congress. We gathered outside the consulate, chanted slogans, displayed some banners. It was a peaceful protest unit. It was a peaceful protest unit. A masked man attempted to take down our displays and started to act aggressively toward us. He was soon joined by other masked men. I was in the midst of things outside the gates of the consulate, trying to stop the masked men from taking away our displays. I then found myself being dragged into the grounds of the consulate. I held onto the gate, where I was kicked and punched. I could not hold on for long and was eventually pulled into the grounds of the consulate. It was then my hair was pulled, and I felt punches and kicks from several men. Other protesters were trying to get me out of this situation, but to no avail. The attack only stopped when a man who turned out to be a uniformed officer from the Greater Manchester Police pulled me outside the gates. Let me say it again so it is clear. I was dragged into the consulate. I did not attempt to enter the consulate voluntarily. I'm shocked and hurt by this unprovoked attack. I'm shocked because I never thought something like this could happen in the UK. I still believe the UK is a place where free speech and lawful protests are basic human rights. No amount of violence or diplomatic pressure will change that. I'm hurt physically and mentally. It was later than I watched the video footage of the incident when I found out the scale of the attack. 6 masked men were involved. I now have bruises on my eye, my head, my neck, and all over my back. I fear I may be silenced by the powers that be. I fear for the safety of my family. But I must take this opportunity to thank the Greater Manchester Police. They are taking this attack very seriously, and I'm committed to helping with the investigation. They are urging people who witnessed this attack to come forward to testify, details of which can be found on the Greater Manchester Police website. I fully trust the Greater Manchester Police will bring the people who committed this unlawful attack to justice. We feel very grateful to the Hong Kong Watch for their sincere and immediate assistance. Lord Eltham of Liverpool, Catherine West MP, and Benedict Roger did give us a helping hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I just confirm as well for everybody here that you have given a statement now to the police in Manchester?
Not yet.
This is the statement. This is the statement that you will give to the Manchester Police in their inquiries. Afzal.
Yeah, can I also add my thanks to all of you for being here, and especially I would say to Bob Chan for being so brave, and again reliving this whole terrible experience that you suffered that day. For me, as a Member of Parliament for that constituency, Beijing continues its crackdown on basic rights and freedoms in Hong Kong in direct violation of its international legal commitments. This includes arresting pro-democracy protesters, lawmakers, journalists, academics, and civil society organizers. It has now demonstrated the full force of Wolf Warrior diplomacy on British soil. As the MP for Manchester Gorton, I have joined peaceful protesters outside the consulate countless times, and I am sickened that such an event took place in my own constituency. Greater Manchester Police GMP has confirmed that a man was dragged in a peaceful protest, was dragged inside the grounds of the consulate and was assaulted on the 16th of October. Thanks to the quick actions of the GMP officers, the victim was rescued and subsequently spent the night in hospital. Had GMP not acted and intervened in this manner and quickly, this could have escalated into an even more serious incident. As a former police officer, I want to pay tribute to the brave effort of the police. These scenes, which are reminiscent of the aggressive and intimidating tactics of the Chinese Communist Party, have no place on the streets of Manchester or our country. The UK stands for freedom, the rule of law, and democracy, and the quashing of peaceful protest will never be tolerated on British soil. The allegation that staff and the Consul-Generals were involved in the incident is deeply concerning and must be investigated urgently. Yesterday, we secured an urgent question, and I urged the Minister to take immediate action and declare the Consul-General as a persona non grata. I also asked what steps the government will take to protect the pro-democracy activities here in the UK. And I want to be clear that this is the absolute bare minimum the government should be doing. And frankly, the weak response from the Minister was wholly disappointing. It is clear that human rights are under threat as we speak in China, whether it is the ongoing genocide against Uyghur Muslims or the suppression of liberties in Hong Kong. However, the UK government's failure to take action time and again is shameful. If the UK does not take action, it risks setting a dangerous precedent which goes directly against British values. And most importantly, it is paramount that justice is delivered for Bob. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to go to questions first, if I can, David and Ben, and then we can come back to you. So bear in mind that the language is difficult. We have an interpreter with us, of course, and Bob is struggling a little bit to understand you. So if you want to ask a question, put your hand up, please, and I'll start.
Matt Fry from Channel 4 News. Bob, well done for turning up. It sounds like you've been tough time there. Looking at the footage and hearing what you've had to say, I wonder if you were targeted by the Chinese officials. Because others, as far as I understand, other people were not dragged into the consulate territory. So was it about you, and why would that have been?
應該唔係針對，應該係即係純屬一個意外。係。
Bob said that he doesn't think that he's being targeted. The whole thing was clearly an accident that he's the one being chosen to be dragged in, but it doesn't diminish the severity of the issue.
But was he? Sorry, just one more. Was he the only one who was treated like this?
He's the only one who's being treated like that.
Right, but he wasn't the only. You're a Hong Kong national originally, right? But he wasn't the only Hong Kong national at that demonstration.
點樣數？
即係其他 protester 都係香港人。
大部分都係。
Most of the protesters outside the general consulate are Hong Kongers, and he's one of them.
Yeah, but worth bearing in mind what the CCP put out, which was that they said that they hadn't dragged them in and that they had trespassed originally. Of course, the videos show that to be complete nonsense, and his testimony now completely refutes that, which means they were attempting to lie to the rest of the world about what actually happened. Any other particular questions? Yes, Latika.
Hi, City One Herald. Well, thanks for coming today. Do you still have family in Hong Kong, and are you worried about any repercussions for people that you know are still in Hong Kong? And my question for the MPs is the government responsible so far to send an official to talk to affairs? This is extraordinarily weak. What more can you achieve?
Well, let's start with Bob and your response to the question.
He wouldn't want to talk about if he has any close ones in Hong Kong because it's their safety that is at risk.
On the government's response, it's wholly inadequate. There's no question. I think I'm being slightly kind to them when I say that. The truth is, yesterday they had to be forced to the dispatch box to answer what was to make a statement about a brutal attack on British soil where the police had to get involved, and there was an attempt to take somebody onto Chinese territory, as it were, because that is where they would have gone. It was an outrageous position, but they didn't come to the dispatch box. We had to put a UQ, an urgent question, down to get them there, and having come, essentially they indicated that they were calling in the charge d'affaires. I have no idea why they didn't call the ambassador in almost immediately, but they said the charge d'affaires would be speaking to a minister. What do we discover is that, in fact, the official that came spoke to another official who really did a gentle rap over the knuckles to remind them that they had to stick by our rules. That is not what I call making serious intent by a government. The government, I believe, should have called in the ambassador and said, it is our intention to send a series of people home who were involved in that attack, and they will no longer be welcome in the UK. It's not a case of if they were, it's a case of those that were involved will go back to China because they are persona non grata here in the United Kingdom. That is the kind of warning I would like to have seen my government give, and I'm probably going to put another urgent question down tomorrow to find out why it was that we weren't told exactly what was going on behind closed doors on the front line. Not good enough, as Afzal has already said. Going to have to do a lot better. This was an assault on people in the United Kingdom against all the rights that we hold dear and against our freedoms, and if they're not prepared to stand up for that, then I want to know what is their position then. The lady here at the front, and I'll come around to that. Sorry. Yep.
The government says it's waiting for the Greater Manchester investigation. Complex and sensitive inquiry that will take time.
Rubbish. The truth is, there's no way they're going to prosecute these people, right? So why would you wait for a complex criminal investigation to take place? The one thing we can do immediately, because they are diplomats, is to discharge them from this country, because we have that right. They are diplomats and they have transgressed on our land, on our rules. And so I think it's very simple. Send a very serious warning to them. We identify who those people are. We'll be saying, you go home. That's as simple as that. And I suspect they're slightly worried this will end up in a tit for tat. But the answer is, we are on the right ground. We should then act accordingly, because otherwise other countries around the world will see us act weakly, and they will act weakly in their turn. We have to show this is intolerable. I don't know if the others want to say
Look, for me, I think this is very clear. A red line has been crossed here. On our British soil, they have used this violence. That is not acceptable. And for that, the government has to also be clear that there is a red line and we will take action. Their failure to demonstrate that, it shows we are weak. It shows also that there are more things that can happen in other parts of the world and in Britain too. And next time we will not be lucky what has happened here. It could be more serious.
But David, you might want to come in on that one, because you were doing the House of Lords.
The urgent question was repeated last night in the House of Lords, and I would draw attention to Zach Goldsmith's remarks on behalf of the government, which I felt were a lot stronger than the remarks which had been made in the House of Commons. And he was quite clear that this was an attack on the British way of life. There isn't anything very complicated about identifying the individuals. In fact, I named them last night because they are on social media. You can see their pictures. So we know who they are, and they are all people who work for the Chinese Communist Party in the consulate in Manchester. Declaring them persona non grata, which is what I called for last night and which Afzal called for in the Commons yesterday, is a straightforward thing that the government can do. And it would be giving notice that these people will be removed. They should pack their bags and leave. You cannot do this sort of thing. We now have 140,000 applications, with I think 133,000 having been agreed of Hong Kong people now living in the United Kingdom. Why are they here? It is because of the assault on their freedoms in Hong Kong. What we see every day in the destruction of democracy in Hong Kong, what we see in Xinjiang, what we see in Tibet, and the daily threats to Taiwan, we've now seen on the streets of this country. And I hope it opens people's eyes to the reality of what we are dealing with.
Hi there, I'm Alice Porter from BBC News. Two questions, one for Bob and one for the MPs. Firstly, Bob, just saying really sorry about what's happened to you and thank you for speaking to us today. I wondered if you could tell us if you've ever experienced any intimidation by the CCP in the UK before events concerning either yourself or any of your friends or and then I just wondered if you could tell us what the government is doing to collect evidence of the CCP infiltrating various universities and organisations, and crucially are they gathering evidence of intimidation and harassment when it's taking place?
Bob, you want to answer that first?
Bob said that he has never encountered any act of violence or intimidation before this incident happened, and the people around him haven't had the same experience as well.
On the second question, this is an important point, which is that there is the view amongst many of us now in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords that we've been asleep at the wheel. Successive administrations have looked the other way, and we have things like the Confucius Institutes now all over lots of universities in the United Kingdom. Most of the time it's quite clear that they are watching Chinese Hong Kong students, reporting back on them, intimidating them in many ways, making it difficult for them to take any full part in the universities. We have now, as we know globally actually, Chinese police in different countries, including the UK, intimidating those who have fled China, often using their families back in China on video links to warn them and threaten them of what might happen if they don't return back to China. We know all that's going on. We also know that we had an amendment finally to the Health and Care Bill a couple of months ago, in which we finally got the Health Department to outlaw all products inside the health service that are actually made under slave labour. Now that's got to be extended across the whole of the government, but the reality is the UK is awash with products now made by slave labour in China, and that must be intolerable, and we can no longer turn a blind eye, because all that does, it rewards this kind of brutality and it makes us look weak. So it's time to change our whole position on this. The reality is we face a government in China that is both brutal and determined to basically break every rule that there is on the international order, and the more we keep kowtowing and turning away, the more dangerous it gets. So that, I think, in summary, is where we're campaigning to make sure that the government, which is moving and beginning to move in the right direction, actually moves the whole way in the right direction. David, do you want to come in?
There will be a full-scale debate tomorrow in the House of Lords about China's security and trade. It's a debate about our Select Committee report on those subjects, and one of the issues that we raise in that report is the subversion of our institutions, including our universities. I would particularly commend the report of the former universities minister, who is the brother of our former Prime Minister, Joe Johnson, who, with University College in London, looked at the subversion of institutions, and as Iain has just said, of the role of things like the Confucius Institute. But it goes much broader and wider than that. And if you look at the United Nations, for instance, and the recent debate in the Human Rights Council, where ironically the CCP is a member state, they refuse to even debate the report of their own Human Rights Commissioner, Michelle Bachelet, on what she described as crimes against humanity in Xinjiang. And countries lined up to support the CCP against the British motion that it should be debated. Why? Because they've been subverted, because they're awash with money that is used by the CCP to buy their support. So I think we do have to wake up to this. The reality is that we are asleep at the wheel.
Two questions. One for you, which is, why do you think the British government isn't taking a harder line? And then one for Bob, which is, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? What you did in Hong Kong, why you left, why you come here?
I'm going to do to Bob first.
He said he's uncomfortable revealing his personal details given the safety issues that he will be facing after that. He said he wouldn't be willing to reveal his personal details due to safety concerns.
I think that's reasonable. I think you've got to understand that everybody involved in this gets targeted. MPs are targeted. I have people impersonating me around the world, sending emails to all sorts of other ministers in different countries purporting to be me. This goes on the whole time. So, I understand for him it's a much more dangerous aspect. What was the second question?
Why do you think the government isn't taking a harder line on this and hasn't already called these people persona non grata, given the video evidence?
Well, I think the government line is beginning to toughen up, but there does seem to me to be a problem because I think institutionally we've become so dependent on China that there is huge institutional resistance to that, particularly in the Treasury. In the business department, they are very resistant to any change, and so we've had to fight endlessly on votes on the whole idea of actually calling it genocide in the House of Commons. All of these things are fought non-stop, but I think the message is getting home to the government. But one good example is the US. This is intriguing. We are the part of the Sino-British agreement on Hong Kong, and when that was trashed by the CCP, we should have sanctioned people. We didn't. Then over genocide, we've sanctioned now 2 or 3 people. But America, the US, which wasn't part of the Sino-British agreement, has sanctioned more people than we have. So we should at least become level with the US on sanctioning those who are the perpetrators of genocide and of abuse in Hong Kong. And I think this is the biggest problem. So we are urging the government. This is a wake-up call. A wake-up call to show the long-arm reach of the Chinese Communist Party around the world. Here, in the home of parliamentary democracy, common law, and the natural freedoms and human rights, we find this abuse taking place. With no other better wake-up call than that, I have to say, and we need to act. Can I just go around the record through it? Yeah.
Sorry, just really quickly, when I hear you talk about the government, criticising the government, you sound as if you're a member of the opposition. I wonder if the more immediate reason why the Foreign Office didn't react in the way that you wanted them to react is that the government, and you are a member of the government party, are somewhat distracted by the fact that they're falling apart at the moment.
Well, if that were the case, then it would have only just happened now. The government has had already 3 years on this. I had to fight with my colleagues over getting Huawei banned from the 5G network. So we've carried on through the setting up of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. It's got 30 countries, 300 members. We had a conference in Washington the other day. So we've been fighting in all of our countries, because the UK is not alone in this. We have 30 countries, the parliamentarians, left and right, all believing their countries are not doing enough. So the UK, I believe, is just beginning to start moving in the right direction, but we have to push them harder. This is a wake-up call for them that we've got to go faster and harder. It's not, by the way, I'm not being opposition for the sake of opposition. I'm opposition for the sake of all those people that are being murdered and persecuted in plain view of democratic governments in the world that turn a blind eye to this because they're doing trade. We can no longer use that excuse. It's time for us to wake up and do something about it. It doesn't matter who's in government, by the way, whether it was Labour or Conservative, I'd be still doing the same thing, if that's okay by you. Gentlemen?
Cantonese?
Yeah, okay, over there, and then gentleman over here.
Sorry for Voice of America Cantonese。我想問你，你依家身體最痛嘅係邊度？需唔需要更多去醫院治療？同埋你點樣睇領事同埋外交部發言人嘅講法，同你係完全相反嘅？
He is asking, first of all, are you still hurting, or which part of your body hurts the most? And the second question is, what do you think? Do you think you need further medical care? And the third question being, what do you think about the Chinese consulate giving out a completely contradictory statement of what Bob has said?
而家最痛就係腰骨個位置啦，因為佢而家仲係坐都痛嘅，係啦。咁關於頭先嗰個領事館嗰樣嘢咧，咁我係從來冇想踏足過去範圍嘅，係啦，我係俾人拉入去嘅。
Could you translate that answer?
Bob said that it hurts the most on my back. It hurts whenever I'm sitting. And about the statement given by the Chinese consulate, I have never intended to enter consulate grounds. Like I was being dragged into it involuntarily.
你點樣睇？因為依家領事承認咗佢係有份參與，而佢係有拉你頭髮嗰個人，你點樣睇佢嘅行為？
The General Consulate have admitted that he was involved in the incident and he did pull Bob's hair. So what do you think of that?
野蠻嘅行為係。
Bob says he thinks that's barbaric.
Quite so. Quite so. But I did promise to come over here, and then I'll come round to you. I'm sorry, I'll come down here. I know you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Chief Joshua David, just to return to the previous question about repercussions and this present government's own area of crisis, should we say, perhaps Mr. Cardinal might want to lead on this. Is there a risk, do you think, for a Prime Minister who's in political free fall, desperate for growth, or whatever she can find, to kowtow to people even more to China rather than take the action?
Well, this will be my last question because I actually need to go back to Parliament, have a meeting with Lord Ahmed, who's the Minister. Can I just simply say this in a nutshell? For me, what has happened before the eyes of the whole world may be just the tip of the iceberg. My parliamentarian colleagues have already indicated a number of other areas where we may be concerned what may be happening. So the government needs to wake up and needs to take this seriously, and they need to play their part. And in this point is what we have already seen, they actually need to be clear that this is a red line. And then I think further steps needs to be taken to make sure our country's interest, our values are all protected. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Afzal.
Can I just add to that?
Yes, David.
Non-conservative, I think I would pay tribute, if I may, to the government for a moment. Firstly, for the British National Overseas arrangements that have allowed nearly 140,000 people from Hong Kong to come and settle in this country. And I think that that was the right thing to do, and I think it was a generous and altruistic thing to do, and Liz Truss has played some significant role in that. And secondly, that she, as Foreign Secretary, said that what is happening in Xinjiang is, her words, a genocide. Now that's not kowtowing. She has been very straightforward about this, and I would pay tribute to her for that. There has been a bipartisan approach to this, thanks to Iain, and bipartisan and bicameral in both houses. And on the amendments I moved, trying to have genocide-related trade banned, we had a majority of over 130 in the House of Lords. It came within a whisker of going through in that form in the Commons. So you can see that this isn't something that is just a maverick issue concerning one or two people who are anti-government. Quite the reverse. It's been, for me, salutary that there has been such strong support from senior former cabinet ministers in the Lords, for instance, from the Conservative Party, who have been strong in their support for the positions we have taken. I think this incident, though, in Manchester is like really is a wake-up call. Even coming down on the train yesterday, I live in the northwest of England, people were coming up to me and saying, has that really happened? They'd seen it on social media and in the mainstream media, and they were deeply shocked that Bob was treated in the way that he was.
Lady here, and then I'll come to you after this.
Bob, I'm from Sky News Alex Colson. Thank you so much for talking to us today. I wanted you let us know if you were a BNO who came over from Hong Kong under the current scheme, and then for the parliamentarians. There has been a lot of speculation about the Consul-General up in Manchester, that that was him. I don't know if you've had any confirmation, but if you're able to give us any more information about him being there, that would be great.
Bob.
Bob came here to the UK last year in March and first arrived on the leave outside of the rule leave outside of the rule arrangements by the UK government, and then obtained a BNO visa in the UK.
Yeah, I want to back up David, by the way, that the BNO scheme was generous. Yeah. We've asked for it to be extended to those that couldn't have it, and I think the government has behaved well on that. There's no question at all about it, as should be our position, because we were co-signatories, obviously, signed a British agreement. Repeat your second question, so we go. Oh yes, yeah. Well, all those that know and watch these things all seem to reach the same conclusion that that individual was responsible for the bit of vandalism that took place outside, the tearing down of the posters and the antagonism as a result. And then the very fact that now apparently he's admitted that he was, accidentally pulling someone's hair. I don't know how he would have termed it. Well, we've just heard it now. I hadn't heard it before. But if that is the case, then I suggest that actually what we saw in the videos was more than just tugging someone's hair. And even that is an assault, by the way. If that turns out to be the case, as I said to the government, must say categorically anybody involved in those scenes is not welcome here. If it's the consul themselves, they must go. And they should have hauled the ambassador, and that's the key thing. Haul the ambassador and tell the ambassador we want a full apology, and these people are persona non grata, they're going home, and we'll never tolerate that on British soil.
I hope you'll be insisting that the Chinese embassy confirms or denies the presence of these officials. The Consul-General was photographed the day before this happened at the pagoda in Liverpool, which is in the heart of my city's Chinatown. There's a remarkable resemblance to the man who'd been photographed before yesterday. And there were 3 others whom I named in the House last night. So Consul-General Zheng Shi Yuan, Consul Gao Lianjia, Councillor Chen Wai, and Deputy Consul-General Fan Ying Ji. People identified them, and their names are in social media. So what we need to know from the Chinese embassy, rather than the panel here, is do they confirm or deny? And if they're defending these actions, then that immediately, you don't need a police inquiry to then decide what we ought to be doing about this, and that's, we should be expelling them.
Do you want to say something about the consul and the issue as to whether or not identified?
Yes, Bob said the Chinese consulate released a video on social media of its own CCTV clearly showing that, with actually subtitles saying that staffers were involved in the incident. It clearly shows that he's being dragged in and then allegedly assaulted in that case.
So they're glorying in it. Is that what you're saying?
Sorry?
They're almost celebrating what they've done. Is that what you're saying?
They are spreading misinformation, to be precise.
That's new.
Yeah, okay, I did promise the lady that.
佢問係咪即係佢哋而家喺度歌功頌德嗰個 staff 俾人賣嗰啲 spreading 假資訊？
佢哋嗰條片係話有人嘗試闖入領事館下圍，然之後毆打佢哋嘅職員。
They have summoned the Council Press and made clear, look, this is not tolerated. But what about this demand to expel diplomats? And if they don't do anything, and if this doesn't go forward, do you have a plan of action to take this, put more pressure on the government to ensure this case doesn't get dropped and go away?
Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday in the House of Commons, where we had what we call an urgent question, at first it appeared as though the Minister was saying they will wait for the police inquiry and the prosecutions. It was pointed out to them that some of those prosecutions wouldn't work anyway because they were not on UK soil when the assault took place. So you have a problem. And so then the Minister clarified that and said, oh no, we're not saying that we would rely wholly on the police for the prosecution. We have other things that we will do. And we simply said that, so you admit that you can actually kick them out because they are diplomats, and the UK government has a right to reject diplomats if they're engaged in activities which are detrimental to the country in which they are resident at the time, and this would certainly fill that category. The key thing was that we were after the government to make it very clear to them privately and publicly if possible that this action will follow, not might follow, but will follow, that those who are notified, those who are seen to be and identified as part of that process of the beating up of Bob and all that went with it, they themselves will be subject to dismissal and be asked to relieve as persona non grata the United Kingdom. That's the key bit. And so we're after the government coming forward and being much stronger about that. And what will happen in the Foreign Office, of course, is they'll be debating all of this as to how to go about it, and I suspect they'll be concerned about the tit for tat. But my point is they shouldn't be concerning themselves about that. What we have to do is what's right. not what we think will be acceptable to the other side. What is right here is to get those who are the perpetrators out of the country, even if it means the Consul-General himself is also sent home.
It will certainly be raised again tomorrow in the House of Lords during the full-scale parliamentary debate that we're having in the House about the Select Committee report I mentioned earlier on. But I would draw attention also to what the official opposition, underlining my point about why this is bipartisan and bicameral, what they had to say yesterday in the House of Lords. Speaking for the Labour Party, for the official opposition, they said, we must show that such behaviour will not be tolerated on our streets. And went on to say, why wasn't the Minister in the Commons able to confirm that the Foreign Secretary would immediately summons the Chinese ambassador to demand an explanation for the incident? And he said, I hope that the Minister will urge you to do so without delay. So what Iain is saying to you now is something that has been endorsed, echoed by the official opposition as well. So I think that there's a head of steam building up around this.
Who hasn't asked a question then that was asked? I think, well, I'll go to the lady here and then to you.
He said he hasn't received any kind of direct intimidation, but he's very concerned about his own safety and the people's safety around him. He said yes, the organization is also very worried about their members' safety and in general the risks that operating an organization would face.
I'm going to take 3 more questions, okay? Gentleman here has had his hand up.
Sorry, the Consul's social media shows that over the last year or two he's met dozens of vice chancellors of universities, political councillors, and American that you spent 2 years campaigning to show what China did. Why that message not getting through to the politicians, vice chancellors?
Well, that's an interesting question. Persuading people that there's always a balance in these relationships between the benefits to both sides and cuts both ways. I think trying to get the message across to people on a wider sphere than just Westminster politics, that balance has tilted now significantly in a way that means we now need to be reviewing our arrangements with them and much more cynical and sceptical about what's actually happening rather than face value and just trusting what's going on. I think the Confucius Institute position is a really important one. The amount of money that's now flowing through British universities for various things, including technology projects, etc. All of this stuff needs to be thought again as to what the point and the purpose and how risky does that become for us in security terms as well as in terms of human rights and the general abuses. The failure in some universities not to debate some of these things, the influence that money in China has to silence what should be a forum for debate on anything, much as I might get annoyed sometimes as politicians, they might want to debate certain things. It's their right to do it. They should be doing it. After all, it's one of the reasons to go to university is to exercise your free will and to look carefully at things and to exercise. Where you shut that down, that's the beginning of a kind of tyranny. And I think it is happening. It's happening subtly. And when I talked to the universities group about a year ago, they admitted that they've become very, very dependent as a group on Chinese money, and that is detrimental, and they're looking for ways to offset that now and go in different directions. But that's the key bit where the government should be helping them understand what the issues are. Yeah.
I think the answer as well to your question is follow the money.
Yeah.
The universities have been subverted by the flow of money. At my own university in Liverpool, I invited the Dalai Lama to come and speak in Liverpool, and he did. But not before we had a call from the Chinese embassy saying 2 things. One, you go ahead with this, and there will be no more students from China in your universities in Liverpool. And secondly, we will break the twinning arrangement between Liverpool and Shanghai. Now, neither of those things came to pass, and we went ahead with the visit of the Dalai Lama, but it shows you precisely the kind of pressure that is placed on institutions, and it has got significantly worse as time has gone by. And follow the money with things like Huawei. We've seen only last week that they're saying, oh, we won't now be able to strip it out by the date that we thought we would be able to do. They're hoping there'll be changes in government and so on, so they'll get away with it. Take Hikvision. It's banned in the United States. These are the people who make the surveillance cameras that are used in Xinjiang. And guess what? They're used all over the United Kingdom too, including in places like the Department of Health. It's the only department that has stripped them out. I wonder why. Because they were used in circumstances that even the Department of Health thought were not acceptable. We're moving amendments to the procurement bill on that point. And there's now, again, a head of steam building up around these things, but we shouldn't have taken so long to wake up to all of this.
And I just make the point, IPAC has 30 countries now that are members, across from Japan to the United States. We have 2 co-chairs in each country, left and right, and in each of those countries they have members in Parliament who are members as well, rather like Afzal is here. And the point I'd simply make is we wouldn't have 30 countries meeting together in Washington as we did a few weeks ago if they are also not concerned about the complacency of their own governments. And in other words, there has to be a global rethink about what's happening in China, because it is destabilizing the whole concept of democracy, freedom and the rule of law. That is the critical element, and we don't do it alone, but we also show the way to others as we can.
And it's also about dependence and resilience. I was shocked when we had our inquiry, the International Relations and Defence Select Committee inquiry into trade and security. I extracted from witnesses the total sum that we had spent on face masks, but on lateral flow tests. 10,000 million pounds have been spent in 1 year, bigger than our entire overseas aid budget. We bought 1 billion items, all of which could have been manufactured in the United Kingdom, as we've destroyed our manufacturing base. So I think there are big issues here that we've dodged, and which actually what's happened to Bob, I think, will help will put them into sharp relief and focus.
2 last questions, lady here and lady over there.
Thank you. With Financial Times, I have a question for Bob and for Iain. Bob, you mentioned that you felt you're being grabbed by the hair during the assault, and I'm sure you've seen videos of what happened from different angles afterwards. Do you identify the person who grabbed you as the Consul-General?
即係你事後睇咗好多關於嘅片段，你可唔可以認得出掹你頭髮嗰個就係 Consul 就係做個領事？
我唔可以肯定啊，因為當時是佢掹我晒後邊，但係當然我睇條片嘅時候，因為我戴咗 mask， 所以我都唔可以百分肯定係佢。
He said at the time he felt that his hair was being pulled, but he was being pulled from the back, so he couldn't tell who that person is. And afterwards, as he revisited the scene by watching the videos, he saw that the person who grabbed his hair was en masse, so he cannot be 100% sure that is the Consulate-General.
Yeah.
And Iain, similarly, you mentioned that everyone who's seen the video has come to the same conclusion, identifying the Consul-General. Is that also your identification?
Well, I don't know him personally, so all those that I've spoken to have met him and have seen him have all said that looks very much like the Consul-General, particularly walking down the street smashing the signs. So all I say is that the evidence is pretty there. The police are going to look at this now. They should quite quickly, in a matter of days, be able to identify from the video what was going on. I thought there was a harrowing video when it went behind the bars and looked in, and you could see about 6 people kicking, punching and pulling his hair. I mean, it's a miracle that they didn't do permanent damage to him, frankly. And so I think that's the case.
And that police investigation that you expect in a few days, is that the timeline?
Well, I would hope they can do it speedily. All we want is, the first instant, is to identify who are the perpetrators and to name them. Now, those that they think they can prosecute, they can deal with themselves on prosecution. But the government, I think, then can make a very swift decision. Once it's very clear who these people are, they don't need to wait for a police prosecution because they're diplomats, and as diplomats they have the power to say you're not welcome here and go.
It seemed from the debate in the House of Commons yesterday that there were many MPs who agree with you, but still the government was not changing its line that it would wait for the end of the process and nothing would be done. so far. So I'm wondering in terms of the next steps, in terms of actual practical action, do you expect that the end of that you and other entities who come to review can do or will do to protect the government, or do you think that this is something that the government will let go?
Well, there will be follow-ups tomorrow, urgent questions, because of the nature of what was said and then what it turns out actually happened when the chargé d'affaires came in to see and saw an official. So I think there will be further pressure on this. The key thing here is that, I've had lots of reassurances from the government that they will be tough on these sort of things. What I would like them to do is, too often when the Foreign Office gets involved in something, it's very difficult to get any absolutes out of them at all. They deal in marginals. I just wish right now they would just say simply, anyone who is guilty of, as a perpetrator of the assault on Bob, and even the vandalism I'm not so concerned about because that can be dealt with by the police, but the assault took place in the compound. So my point is, those who are identified as the assault, simply, you're diplomats and you're no longer welcome here. However high that goes, they should simply say, we will follow the evidence. What they need is just who are they? And the rest they can do pretty quickly. And that will send a very strong signal, not just to the CCP, but it will send a very strong signal to other countries that they also now can follow suit and be intolerant of this ghastly behaviour that's taking place. So the last question.
Question for Bob from the Chinese Subversion and Cantonese. Bob 你覺得即係呢件事發生咗之後，對你心理上最大嘅影響係乜嘢？你覺得對香港人嚟講，英國仲係唔係安全嘅地方？第二條問題就係你以後喺英國仲會唔會參與任何示威活動咧？
The question is, what is the psychological impact on you of this attack, and do you think Hong Kongers are safe in the UK, and would Bob participate in protests that is happening in the future?
唔好想問多次第一個問題。
對你心理嘅影響，即係今次事件對你心理嘅影響。
心理影響其實都係擔心安全問題啦。咁同埋第二個問題就係、其實呢件事發生咗係會令我即係擔心人身安全，但係唔代表我唔會再企出嚟，因為你都係嗰句你打擊得我越大，我就越要企出嚟，因為呢一個係我嘅自由，唔應該被咁樣打擊嘅。
仲有英國係咪安全地方？
係啊，我相信安全問題係應該係安全嘅，係。
有冇話擔心到瞓唔着啊，或者係發噩夢啊？
有嘅都係啊，因為最驚就係可能我屋企人會受到傷害啊咁樣咯，係。
Bob said he's very concerned about his safety, and there are times where he has nightmares about having loved ones being hurt. And he thinks that the UK is still a safe place for Hong Kong for now. And he would definitely come out for and protest in the future, because this is his freedom. And the harder the Chinese authorities trying to they're trying to crack down on us, the more that we should do in order to exercise our freedom, and this is our fundamental rights that we should be exercising.
Okay, I'm going to bring this to a close now. Can I just thank everybody here? Can I just say one final thing by way of reminder? I'm enormously impressed that Bob was brave enough to come here to make his statement, and I thank him enormously for having that courage. It's a little wake-up reminder to all of us in this room that take all of our freedoms for granted on a daily basis, and we should remind ourselves that we've rather forgotten about what's happened in Hong Kong, and that on a daily basis members of the media, reporters, media owners, others are regularly arrested, put in prison, persecuted, something that would be an abomination over here is happening every day, and that people like Bob, who've come over here and who continue to protest in support of freedom, I think it's an enormous honour to have Bob in this room. And I want to thank all of you for unusually taking your time out to come and record his words, and I hope you will spread them far and wide, because if we stand for nothing at all, we stand for freedom and human rights, and that's the basis. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, well, yeah. By the way, the Speaker indicated to me that he would grant it. Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm like that bit of chewing gum you can't get off your shoe. We will keep hounding what we do.
Yeah, he can do that.
Yeah, you all right with all that?
Maybe I just walk closer.
I